Hi, I'm Tony.
I'm Patrick.
Welcome to Cave to the Cross Apologetics, and we are continuing in our study, our discussion of Greg Koukl's book, Tactics, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions, right? And so we've been working our way through this. His mother of all questions, because the issue here is we need to ask good questions when we're conversing with folks, is what he calls the Columbo, right? Columbo question, right? And so what is this Columbo tactic that he's talking about? Well, he says the Columbo tactic is a disarming way to go on the offensive with carefully selected questions that productively advance a conversation. That's the Columbo tactic, right? There's a specific purpose for the questions that we ask. We want to gain information. So we ask, what do you mean by that? Right? We want to reverse the burden of proof, right? In other words, we want that person, once they make a claim, to tell us why they believe that claim is true, right? And so we ask, how did you come to that conclusion, right? We don't just jump on every claim that someone asks. Right. It's their.
Let them build their house. Yeah. You don't need to build it for them.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? And the third point is the third question here, Columbo related, is to make a point. We ask a leading question, right? Have you ever considered, or can you clear this up for me, right? So to help them to get to a clarifying area in the discussion, right?
So we go into part 2 of finding the flaws, and I really wish authors would stop using this because it is not YouTube friendly. But it talks about let's just call it views of self-destruction. Yeah, and we'll leave it at that. And that's probably what I'll title this video.
Views of self-destruction.
So just understand that we're not mentioning a word because YouTube doesn't like when people talk about that stuff.
Yeah, and so actually the next 3 chapters are dealing with this, and he gives us in various ways in the next 3 chapters, I think, is what we'll see here. So yeah.
And so if you were with us with our Nancy Pearcey's Finding Truth, this was one of the principles that she talked about, and it's essentially the internal critique, which is my favorite. It's finding what someone is claiming, see if it's internally consistent. If it isn't, you can kind of just declare it as inconsistent and move on. Yeah,
help them to see that, right?
And you can put something else in its place, which is always what we want to do. We learned that from Nancy Pearcey's Principle 5, and we don't want to just leave them with nothing on the table. We want to say there is objective truth, and you've made that accounting within your question that you asked me. Let me tell you about where I stand on objective truth, where the Bible stands, where God stands, and so that's the great thing about this. It's further helping us to identify internal inconsistencies, which is the fun one, because once you find it, you kind of remember it. But sometimes it's really hard because there's so many to do, and so that's where finding truth gets us the kind of principles to attack. And
I think Nancy Pearcey even referenced Greg Koukl's book in that particular chapter. Yeah.
And so here it is. Look at that. We're all tying it together. So nice. It's almost like we're a community of some way. So views that self-destruct. If someone's thinking is flawed, the key to finding the error is to listen carefully to the reasons, right? And then ask yourself if the conclusions follow from the evidence. Again, if you're used to putting things into logical, point 1, point 2, therefore conclusion, this might be easy, and there are good ways for that. William Lane Craig talks about the benefits of philosophy and helping apologetics. Probably going too far from where we would say to go to, but it's always good to kind of say, okay, here's the claim, and here's the evidence that they're pointing to for that claim. Does that follow? Are the conclusions logical? Yeah. Or does it get tripped up?
Yeah, and you don't have to be, you don't have to be a philosopher. You don't have. I mean, we do this all the time in our everyday, in our everyday conversation. So you said this and this and this, but that doesn't seem to connect, right? That's really what we're doing here, right? That doesn't. This conclusion doesn't follow from what you just said, right? Yeah. Or if that's true, then it seems like it's false,
Right.
right? Your particular statement here is kind of self-destructive, right? And again, we do that all the time,
Right.
Yeah?
You are inside with somebody. You notice someone running in. They're dripping with water, and you turn to your friend and go, "Boy, I wouldn't shower with my clothes on." Well, okay, I mean that might have happened, but where did you come up with that conclusion from? Is that the most logical conclusion? Yeah. Now, obviously, that might have been the case.
Yeah,
they were having an experiment. They were pulling the safety shower, and boy, I wouldn't want to be there too.
Yeah.
But we're talking about logical inconsistencies here, and so again, I think this is one of the fun one. So many erroneous views, though, self-destruct. It's great because they do it themselves. They're commonly known as self-refuting views. There's no need to expend energy addressing views that are bent on destroying themselves. All you need to do is point it out.
Yeah. So if it's destroying ourselves, if it's self-destruct, all you have to do is just
push the button,
right. So when an idea or an object violates, we call this the law of non-contradiction, or sometimes it's called the law of contradiction. So when an idea or objection violates the law of non-contradiction, which basically says something like A is the case and A is not the case, right? This is a microphone and this same thing is not a microphone, right? That's violating the law of non-contradiction. And if it does it in a straightforward question, he says we can call that formal self-destruction.
Right.
Right. You thought I was going to say the word, didn't you?
I was going to bleep you out. And we saw this same point being made in Keeping Faith in the Age of Reason by Jason Lyle. He talked about how people say, "Oh, that's a Bible contradiction." Well, they don't actually mean a contradiction in the sense that A is the case and A is not the case. Jesus is a man and Jesus is not a man. Saying Jesus is a man and Jesus is God is not this kind of formal self-harm that it does.
Right.
You have to ask clarifying questions. You have to understand where the person's coming from. But if someone says this is the case, but this is also not the case, then that's the bad part.
Yeah. That's the self-refuting, self-destruction part, right? The statement itself fails to live up to its own standards. Basically, is what he's suggesting here, right? For instance, if someone says there is no truth, really? So is this statement true?
Right.
Right. Notice it's failed to live up to its own standard, or there are no absolutes. So is this an absolute? Right. So, or you can't know anything for sure. So are you sure about that? Right. So these are the types of things that he's suggesting here with regard to this self-destruction in terms of statements.
Right. So he talks about the self-harm tactic works because of the rule of logic you're already familiar with. Even if you're not familiar with its name, it's called the law of non-contradiction. This law reflects the common sense notion that contradictory statements cannot both be true at the same time. Car is in the garage, the car is not in the garage. It's either one or the other. If it's able to be kind of nuanced, then obviously it's not a formal contradiction. And so he gives many examples in this chapter, and it's really good because it shows conversations that he's actually had with people, or that we've seen in our kind of normal Christian walk. And this one's called "Can God Make a Rock So Big He Can't Lift It?"
Yeah.
Or if you're a Simpsons fan, can God make a burrito so hot that he himself could not eat it? That's the Bart Simpson one.
Wow.
Yeah. This challenge is called a pseudo question. Well, why? Well, it's like asking if God can beat himself up, who would win? And so what's the contradiction here? Well, it's a nonsense question because it treats God as if he were two instead of one.
Right.
So what does it mean that he can he himself make a rock so big that he can't lift it?
Right.
So you're competing God against God here. Okay. Well, the question proves nothing about the deficiency in God because the question itself, can God's omnipotence defeat his omnipotence? It's incoherent.
Right.
And so we can talk about, God can't do anything that's contradictory to his own self. And so we can talk about the Zeno's paradox, right?
Well, that's the one, that's the moving one half of, if you go half, you're right. That's Zeno's paradox.
So not Zeno's paradox. Does God pull anything out from the ether? Can he go against his own moral claims? And so he talks about the claims from his own being. God cannot lie, and so would it ever be moral for God to lie? Well, you're talking about competing God against God, and so we wouldn't want to do that. God doesn't take sides. So he talks about here a Los Angeles Times kind of full-page ad being put here. And it says, you think God is on your side, but you're wrong. God doesn't take sides. So he asks, well, okay, let me ask you a question. If this disagreement we're having on whether God takes sides, what do you think God's opinion is? Well, I just told you, God isn't taking sides. He's against it. Right. So in our dispute, I'm saying God does take sides. You're saying God doesn't take sides. So in our dispute, God would agree with you, right, and not me. That's right. Okay, he would side with you on this issue then. I guess God does take sides after all. So again, can God ever say anything then? That's the question. And again, it's treating God as kind of this dual aspect to himself that you're competing God against God.
Yeah, really what you're saying is God takes sides and God doesn't take sides. Right? Because you're saying that God has taken my side, but you're saying he doesn't take sides. So he's taken my side that he doesn't take sides, which means he does take sides, but you're claiming that he doesn't take sides. So now you're contradicting yourself, right? And so that's a self-refuting idea here, right? And he gives us, say, wow, this seems really complicated. It really isn't. He gives us a couple of ways here to figure out exactly what's going on. First, he tells us to pay attention to the basic idea, the premise, the conviction, or the claim. Right, so what's going on here? Let's pay attention to what they're saying here. He says, try to identify exactly what they're saying. Right. Next, he says, ask if the claim applies to itself. Does it apply to itself? If so, then there's a contradiction. Right, that's the basic idea. Does the statement fail to live up to its own standards? Can it be stated in the form A is the case and A is not the case? Right. If so, again, it is self-destructive.
Right. There is no objective truth.
Yeah.
Well, then say, okay, there is no objective truth. Is that an objective truth? Oh, okay. Truth can only be found through science.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that truth? Is that statement that's true? Can that be found by science? No.
Right.
Okay. So there are
it's
other ways.
It's a statement about science. It's not a scientific experiment that we perform to determine.
We didn't titrate it. We didn't do a scratch test on it.
Yeah.
The claims are not evidence. Okay, is that evidence?
Yeah.
Or can I physically hold that? Can I run it around the table? Can I do something with that? No, that's a claim. So that's not evidence. That evidence is a claim. So again, these things you're just pausing to then apply itself to itself.
Yeah.
And if it fails itself, it's self-destructive.
All right, exactly. Here's another example he gives us. To err is human. Well, we've all heard that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like straightforward, right? That's the basic problem here with this particular illustration. So here's the illustration. He says, men wrote the Bible and people are imperfect, therefore the Bible is flawed and not inspired by God. There's their argument, right? Yep. Men wrote the Bible, people are imperfect, therefore the Bible is flawed and as such it's not inspired by God. Now, he tells us here the presumption that if a man is capable of error, then he will err also applies to this very argument against inspiration.
Right.
Right?
And again, it's not just the length of the Bible versus the sentence. The assumption is if man writes it down or does something with it, they err. That's the claim. There's no clarification. Are you saying that they err all the time, or is it just on books over 4 pages long?
No, 2 pages.
Okay. Well, that's good. So what we're doing is we're presenting that claim of if men write it, then it's an error. Does that apply to itself? Right. That same question.
Right, exactly. And so, so you think the Bible must be flawed because people make mistakes. That's what they think they're saying, right? The problem is you'd say, well, wait a minute, I'm curious. Why do you think you are an exception to that rule and haven't made a mistake about the Bible? Right? So if what people write down or what people say, if we err, then how do you know you're not error?
Right.
Right.
Just in everything, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever been wrong about something?
Yeah.
So could you be wrong about this? Yeah. I mean, you're utilizing again the Columbo tactics, the questions to ask these leading questions, and so you could get to a point where you say something like, "Can you explain to me why God isn't able to preserve His word?" But that's farther down, and so we're concentrating just on an internal critique here. But if you're wanting to kind of spin the question into something else, then you're putting the burden of proof back on them. Well, you're saying that God is unable to preserve His word, or God is unable to communicate with us. Why is that the case? And so well, I don't even believe in God. Oh, well, there's the point. You're not arguing fairly. Right. You're making a claim.
Well, or at least that's your real point, right? So let's talk about that instead of this error in the Bible and that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly.
Let's talk about that particular issue.
Right.
Yeah. So he gives us many examples here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The statement like everyone's view is a product of his own prejudice, or all your so-called facts are only beliefs dictated by your cultural biases falter for the same reason, right? Yeah. Everyone's view is a product of his own prejudice, including that one. So yes. Okay, well that doesn't say much about.
Okay, fine. So we know what your prejudices are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop being prejudiced.
Yeah, we all got them, and you got one too here.
All your so-called facts are only beliefs dictated by your cultural biases, including that one. That facts are dictated by beliefs of my culture.
Yeah, are your facts dictated?
Right.
Are your beliefs dictated by your cultural biases? Right. In other words, you kind of turn the question over on itself and ask, and if it can't stand, then it's self-destructive, right? It refutes itself. Yeah.
Are these views themselves merely a product of prejudice or cultural bias? If so, why take them seriously?
Yeah.
So again, why take them seriously? You push the button, self-destruct. Push it a couple times.
Yeah. Here's another example. He calls, religious self-destruction, right? The notion of religious pluralism, he tells us, is the idea that all religions are equally true or valid. And he says this is self-refuting as well.
Sure.
Right? If all religions are true, then Christianity is true. Yet a central claim of classical Christianity is that other religions are false. And so you see where I'm going here. If you think it here, you can see where I'm going, right? Central claim of Christianity, classic Christianity, is that other religions are false when taken as a whole. So here's the issue. Either Christianity is correct that Jesus is God's Messiah for the world, and other religions are false, or Christianity is false and some other view is true. And so in no case can all religions be true and valid.
Right.
Right?
Because some of them have exclusivity, like Christianity, classical Christianity. I'm not sure about the liberal view of it, how you get around to that. I am always a truth and a life, I guess, maybe, if you want to.
Yeah.
And so,
but there's several more.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's fine, except for those that also claim exclusivity, which Judaism, Islam, to account for some of them. Kind of the big monos talk about one God, and you can't have a pantheon there, unless you get into Mormonism, and that's a whole nother bag of self-harm that happens. So again, this chapter deals with a lot of different type of examples to kind of make the point. If you're not used to this. Looking at the claim initially and seeing if it applies to itself, then this would be a good chapter to read. Things like, we talked about evolution only gives us the ability to survive, and so only presents us with survivable instincts and things that benefit only survival. And so if a truth claim is not beneficial to our survival, we could be delusional.
Right.
There's the delusion right there.
Yeah.
And so you talk about that claim. Okay, well, if evolution only gives us the ability to survive, does that claim itself just give us the ability to survive? Is it true at all then?
Yeah.
How do we
know that's true?
How would we know that's true?
Yeah.
And does it present us with survivability? I don't know how knowing that we can survive with survivability allows us to survive, but
now your head's starting to spin.
There you go.
Here's another one here. He says, here's one. Atman is Brahman and Brahman is Atman.
Yeah, this is a good one. So this one talks about kind of like East versus West type mentality. And so, the whole Christianity is white man's religion. You don't get this issue with Eastern philosophy. Well, you kind of do.
Yeah, so the idea here is that pantheistic monism, at the heart of some versions of it anyway, teaches that reality as we know it is an illusion, right? Maya, and of which each of us is a part. So this Hindu concept, he tells us that the world is an illusion, contradicts the idea that I can know that I'm a player in the illusion, right? Implicitly, it claims that I'm not real, right, myself, and that I am real at the same time.
Right. We did talk about this in Nancy Pearcey's book.
Yeah. So the central doctrine here of Hinduism self-destructs. If I am an illusion, how could I know it? How could I possess true knowledge that does not exist? Right. I think, therefore, I ain't. Do people in a dream know they're imaginary? Does Charlie Brown know that he's a cartoon character? Right? No, it's just an illusion. Well, okay, if that's the case, then am I an illusion, and how do I know it? Right, is the issue here, right? So the concept here self-destructs once you apply it to itself.
Right. Right, and we just don't get out of the law of non-contradiction by saying, oh, that's kind of a Western type mentality, because a computer works just as well in China and India than in New York or Los Angeles, and so you still have
no kidding.
You still have,
so I can go to India, plug in my computer, and it'll work.
Yeah, it's not illusionary.
Wow.
Or the other side of Jupiter, or wherever you might be. And so you either have to say that the law of non-contradiction is local or doesn't apply everywhere at all times, but then does it apply there? Is that true everywhere? Yeah. That the law of non-contradictions don't apply everywhere?
And right. And, yeah.
And see, this is kind of the benefit of having the internal critique is you're looking at what they're presenting you, and before you're even talking about, the benefits of having an objective value of God, which is, outside of humanity, it's an objective value for God, and we talked about that with Mitch Stokes and how he kind of presents a subjective value in God's mind. So listen to the interview with Mitch Stokes on that one, or you just have the ability to figure out where to take the conversation from there, and if it fails kind of to meet its own claim, then bring that forward, push the button.
And again, you do this, with grace, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not ugly, you're not mean, you're not trying to humiliate the person, right? You're trying to point out this particular issue and then move on from there, as you said. Mm-hmm. Well, I can't help but this last one in this chapter, this one is, he says, I once saw a sign in a restaurant that read, quote, "You are what you eat." I pointed out to the waitress that if we were what we eat, then we couldn't be something until we ate something. But we can't eat something unless we are something. Therefore, it's not true that we are what we eat. The waitress, unschooled in the finer points of self-refuting arguments, looked at me and said, "You'll have to take that up with the manager."
Right? It's like when you see 10 items or less. No, it's 10 items or fewer. Come on now. So what did we learn in this chapter? Again, at the end of each chapter, he goes over this, and so it's really good to kind of familiarize ourselves, especially with a new concept like this. And again, it's not always the easiest thing to do. And that's what tactics is talking about, is sometimes it's easy just to jump on answering. let's take a step back and see if there's an internal critique that we can do here that kind of does the heavy lifting for us. It's destroyed itself. Good, push the button. Views that violate the law of non-contradictions are necessarily false. A square is a circle that doesn't have any points. No, that's not what it is. So it's necessarily false. So you don't have to prove that it's false. It is false just by its own claim. How to recognize and respond to self-destructive statements. First, pay attention to the basic conviction or claim.
Yeah.
There are no absolutes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think there are absolute. Wait, hold on. Is that an absolute claim? Are you stating that there are absolutes with that claim? Next, ask if the claim applies to itself. If so, does it satisfy its own criteria, or is there an internal contradiction? Science speaks. It gives us truth on natural phenomenon. Yep. Okay. That works. And so it's not going outside the realm of science. It's not even saying within the scope of that statement that it's able to find truth of that statement. It's sticking with naturalistic claims that science can be utilized on. So then, if you discover a problem, use a question. Columbo tactic, right? Rather than a statement to point it out.
Right.
Are you saying, how did you come to that conclusion? Would you help me understand this? Are there such thing as absolute truth, including that statement, or no? How do you get around that? And so again, you're not pointing in their face, go, ha,
gotcha.
Good one.
Yeah. No, we don't play gotcha with people.
We try not to. So again, this is the self-harm chapter. We'll continue to be self-harm because we want to make YouTube overlords happy. And so we talk about kind of practical implications for this next time, and continue on this kind of chain of events for the next couple chapters. So hopefully you'll join us for next time. And thanks. Keep subscribing, keep sharing, keep listening, keep leaving us comments. We appreciate it. And patreon.com/Cave of the Cross to keep the lights on, keep us some books. We need more. The books are being written every single day. Did you know that? we have access to them. So keep supporting us just by enjoying our content. That's what we most want you to come away with. These books are beneficial to our walk, to our Christian faith.
And we hope you learned something.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're doing here. We learned a lot, so we want to share that with you. So thanks, and join us next time.
We'll see you next time.